Hi everyone and welcome to Game 2 of Round 7 of the Star City Games Invitational Qualifier Tournament held in Doncaster. We have Rob Catton, who is 1-0 up at the moment against Amar Dattani. Both are on the Esper Stoneblade deck. What do you suppose that the players will have sideboarded at this point, Lee?
They may have upped the number of one-drop discard spells they have. They also brought in extra engineered explosives, disenchant, extra vindicator. They got maybe some O-rings for the Jace fights, maybe even Jace Baleran to fight the Jace fight as well.
It's a bit of a hark back to the old Coreblade matchup. That.
Yep, more Jaces.
Yep. It just looks like we've got a bit of a communication issue here, as we discussed earlier. Communication in Legacy is such a important part of the game, and it just looks like there's been a bit of cross wires here, and we're just going to have to get a judge on what's happened here, because Amar has looked at the top card of his library here, so we're just going to see what the judge has to say, and we will be back with you very shortly. Okay, we've had the judge on here, and he has simply asked Amar to re-randomise his deck and given Amar a warning for looking at the top card of his library, which seems pretty fair at that point.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's just the thing that has to be done.
Yeah. Stoneforge Mystic here from Rob. Amar's going to crack that polluted Delta. Personally, I'd be thinking of something like Spell Snare here, but
the Esper Blade deck's just tended to cut it nowadays because it's very narrow. I mean, there's some matchups where it's absolutely amazing in, but other matchups where it's just not that good.
Yeah. And Amar's brainstorming here. Do you think he's just digging for a force of will here?
I'd imagine that's what he's doing, unless Amar's randomly put some daisies in his deck. That would be another card he's digging for.
You always feel a little bit bad, don't you, when you have to crack a fetch land and then brainstorm. So it's essentially a bit of a naked brainstorm. You can end up locking yourself.
Yeah, he's going to be stuck with those two cards on top of his deck unless he's got another fetch land. So
certainly not a, certainly not something that's guaranteed. He's not going to have another fetch in hand.
It's not the most optimal brainstorm, but I'm guessing he felt he needed to try and answer that Stoneforge Mystic.
And with Rob having already used a Spell Pierce, he might have a few less answers in hand.
I mean, it has also more or less guaranteed the brainstorm result, because I don't see Rob force of willing that.
Fair enough. Rob got Sword of Feast and Famine, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it lets him play multiple spells a turn, harkening back to the old Coreblade decks in Standard. That glorious format that was. Amar did find or had the swords. I imagine he didn't actually have the swords because he probably would have just let the Stoneforge result and not burnt his brainstorm.
Okay, so Rob with an Underground Sea and an Inquisition of Kozilek. And what do we see from Amar? He's got Stoneforge Mystic, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Engineered Explosives, Lingering Souls. So no fourth land there for Amar yet, which could be potentially troublesome for him, especially if he wants to cast that Jace. Rob's pretty much got no option there, does he?
No, yeah, he just takes that anyway. He's not going to take the Lingering Souls.
And he's obviously not going to take the Engineered Explosives with an Academy Ruin sitting there either. It's Lingering Souls from Amar.
So now Amar has a fresh card on top of his deck. He doesn't know what it is.
Yep. No fourth land though, so he obviously wasn't hiding land. Rob makes a fourth land here, and Vindicate on the Tundra. That's pretty brutal for him.
It's a pretty aggressive play as well. I mean, that Vindicate is an answer to Jace, so you've got to wonder whether it was worth it. But looking at the situation he was in, it would have been quite good if Amar didn't have that second land.
Yeah, I mean, if Rob does have a fifth land and a Snapcaster Mage in hand, he could just be looking to screw Amar completely out of the game.
Yeah, and then he can deal with the Spirit Tokens at his leisure.
Yeah, but it looks like he does not have that, because he doesn't have at least one component of it, let's put it that way. Although whether he'd fire it off now, he probably still does to take him off the blue.
Yeah, I think he would do, but he's got to be worried that Amar may have spell pierce as well.
Yeah. Although he probably knows his hand at this point, wouldn't he?
Yep. It's an easy thing to sometimes forget that, though.
Yeah. Rob with his non-optimally artworked brainstorm there, shall we say? Not keeping his brainstorms consistent. Engineered explosives for naught from Rob there, so that's those spirit tokens dealt with unless Amar's going to stifle or trick bind his way out of this one.
Interestingly, there is his 5th land. We have to assume he drew that off the brainstorm, or he doesn't feel like Vindicator lands the player and he wants to save it to deal with a future chase, perhaps.
I mean, he may not have the Snapcaster either. If he doesn't have the Snapcaster, or that wasn't his plan, I do feel like that Vindicate was a bit aggressive.
It's always awkward in Legacy to try and... I mean, some decks do it better than others, but to try and get free wins by screwing your opponents on lands. I mean, Rugdale was probably the best deck at doing it.
I mean, to be fair, Rugdale was built to do that for the most part. It's hit with 4 Stifles and 4 Wastelands.
Yeah, but they have the 1-drop threat to back it up, where the Esper Stoneblade deck is a bit glacial when it comes to applying pressure.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Rugdelver deck can make a Nimble Mongoose on turn 1 and then just spend the rest of the game with no land in play thanks to its daisies and other such cards.
Yeah.
Spinning back, it's kind of hard to deal with a Nimble Mongoose when you have no land in play.
Yep, that's correct.
As someone who's played a lot of Rugdelver yourself,
There's been many games where I've ended up with nothing on the board, no cards in hand, no Rugdelver doing lethal damage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting choice to play these. I suppose if they were in Standard right now, they'd be mid-rangey decks. But in Legacy, these are like the late game control decks.
Yeah, I mean, Esper Stoneblade's about as close to pure control as you're going to get in Legacy, isn't it?
I mean, there are some like mono blue decks that can be a more controlling deck. They sometimes run factor fiction and things, and generally run back to basics.
Yeah. I suppose the Miracles deck counts along those lines.
I'd say Miracles is more controlling than Esper Stoneblade.
It'll also have the. Having said that, though, the Miracles deck can also have the Rest in Peace Helm combo now to...
Yeah, so it's combo control. One of the... generally in Legacy, your deck wants to be 2 different kinds of things, like aggro control is quite a popular deck with the bug decks, and like these like mid-range control.
High Tide was probably one of the first combo control decks, wasn't it?
Yeah, we haven't seen any of that around this weekend.
So Rob's just fired off a pretty depressing Inquisition of Kozilek there. He sees a backup Jace the Mind Sculptor from Amar, Lingering Souls and Engineered Explosives.
Yeah, so if Rob's only removal for Jace is his own Jace, not only has Amar already replaced his Jace with the Brainstorm, he has got the second Jace to put into play as well.
A nice little trick from Rob there. He got that Sword of Feast and Famine earlier.
Yeah, I don't believe he's playing 2. Well, he probably just brainstormed it back and then shuffled his deck. And then fetched it again with a Stoneforge Mystic.
There's just so many interactions between those cards, Brainstorm, Jace. It's Esper Stoneblade does present its pilot with an awful lot of lines, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And individually, its cards aren't that powerful. I mean, Jace the Mind Sculptor, very powerful. Jitter, very powerful. Brainstorm, powerful way to find these cards, but everything else is kind of a bit mediocre by itself.
Yep. Amar spent his 4 mana there blowing up Stoneforge Mystic with Engineered Explosives, and he's just using his Brainstorm to go ahead and make some land drops now. So, and Hardcast Batterskull from Rob Catton there.
Yeah, he's desperation time if he's doing that. I mean, Amar can bounce it this turn and then uses Academy Ruins to return his Engineered Explosives, and if he always has that set on 0, then the Germ's not going to be able to carry the skull.
So Amar with 2 mana there. Always love it when people do that. They tap 2 mana, lay a land or something, and what is often known in blue-white circles, or at least I call it in blue-white circles, the mirror breakers just hit the ground.
So Amar's sideboarding Geist of St. Traft, which is very difficult for the opposing deck to deal with, apart from with its own Geist of St. Traft.
And if Rob isn't running those, then he's got major trouble here. Legend ruling the Academy Ruins away.
Interestingly, if you Legend rule the Academy Ruins, it can't be tapped for mana in response. There is no point in which you're allowed to do that.
Pretty sure in the past there has been a way to do that back in Academy days, but they were rather dark days in Magic's history, shall we say.
I thought they were mainly blue.
Lee Houldsworth, ladies and gentlemen. Right. And in for 6 with Geist of St. Draft. At least what I'm assuming is 6. Should be bringing some of your own angel tokens here. I think that's a pretty brutal combination Amar's got on the table there. How about I hit you for 6 and then have some brainstorming?
Yeah, it's very hard for Rob to get back in this game, especially with Amar having the backup Jace as well.
It seems like both games have gone very similar. One side's got all the equipment and the other side has a Jace, and it just seems like the Jace has won on that occasion.
The thing is, when you've got a control deck that's built to deal with the metagame of creatures, making your creatures against that control deck doesn't really get you there. And that is a Geist with a Jitty.
Yeah, for those of you who are fed up of the hexproof deck in Modern or Standard, here's a Geist with a Jitty on it.
You will not see any Ethereal Armors in this matchup, I promise.
No. But that's pretty powerful, having a Jitty on a Geist there. Although if I'm not mistaken there, I believe that Amar played that post-combat. Because that Jitty doesn't have any... he may have brainstormed into it post-combat. And then made it rather awkwardly after combat.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I believe he didn't brainstorm pre-combat due to Vendilion Clique possibly being in Rob's hand. And if he makes the Vendilion Clique and blocks the Geist, then Amar wants to, you know, he doesn't want to have wasted his brainstorm, he wants all the information possible.
However, the Geist with the Jitty on it is coming in this time. Always feels a little bit sheepish when you do that, doesn't it? When you brainstorm and then go, oh, I could have... But it's standard. Might be something we have to talk about in Game 3 because this one's coming to an end at this point. But I think we could... it's like maybe thinking about some more sort of non-standard good player tendencies. Anyway, Rob has packed them in for that game and we are going to go to a Game 3.